Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It is Wednesday, March 6, 2024. I'm Jason Weil. This is the weekly JupyterLab call. We have 8 people, including myself, on the call. If you have not already done so, please sign in on the HackMD. And we also have a couple topics on the agenda. Please add on the agenda if you want to talk about anything on the record here. Before we get started with the agenda, real quick public service announcement. Um, Next week in the US, most of the US begins daylight saving time, so we move the clock 1 hour later, but most of Europe doesn't do that until March 31st. So that means that for our European friends, you should join this meeting next week 1 hour earlier. The Google Calendar is anchored to US Pacific time. So if you're using that, it should be an hour earlier for you. I am sorry we haven't figured this out by now, but that's how it is. Mike is next up on the agenda with a few different items. Mike, go ahead.
Okay, so let me start with a quick announcement. JupyterLab 4.1.3 was released on Monday, and we fixed some of the regressions which were since JupyterLab 4, and huge thanks to the contributor who helped us to fix the code mirror highlighting for Python uh, on chain, and that is getting backported to 4.0x. And then a number of other bug fixes were included as well. And one of these bug fixes was concerning the keyboard issues that cropped out after the release of JupyterLab 4.1. Namely, when users were typing on some keyboard layouts, especially compact keyboards where you need to press a combo to input a certain character, especially on Mac, they were not able to type certain characters due to new shortcuts that we added. And the solution that was included in 4.1.3 was to always give precedence to user input if that results in a new character being typed. Unfortunately, it had some side effects. There is a pull request which is trying to fix that, which is linked in the agenda. There are actually two pull requests. One is a solution for right now, and that's pull request number 15913. I'm adding it to the agenda right now. And I would appreciate a quick review on the hotfix in 15913, because that's something we should probably release soon to fix all these side effects. But there is also like a larger conversation on the long-term fix. And I suggested a way forward which involves modifying the Lumina API a little bit to allow us to hold the execution of a command until we can be certain that the user input would not be prevented by a given shortcut, and also to mark some key bindings as preventing or not preventing the default browser behavior. The way it is basically after a long exploration of possible solutions. Like we cannot just read out the keyboard layout. That's what we discussed previously. Even though there was a proposal to include an API for that in the web stack, it was largely rejected by some major browsers, namely Firefox, because of privacy reasons. So that's not an option. So here we are. The other item is that I'm working on Workspaces UI, and draft pull request is on the way. That's also tracked in an issue. Isabella, who is on the call, kindly provided mockups for how it should look like, how it could look like. I have some questions on that. Some of the actions could be either performed on the existing workspace, or we could ask user whether they want to choose the workspace to act on, especially like when it's embedded in the menu. And for some actions, maybe we should not allow them to be performed on the current workspace. So for example, deletion. If you use workspaces or plan to use them once there will be a user interface, please do leave a comment. Have a look at the questions in the issue linked in the agenda, and I will try to include that in the implementation. And that workspaces UI would be a part of JupyterLab 4.2, at least aspirationally, for which the first alpha is out, and there is already a reasonable number of pull requests. A few smaller ones were already merged, so mostly things which couldn't be backported because it was modifying the labels, so translatable strings, which would break things for users using language packs if we backported them. But there are like feature pull requests waiting for a review. And if you can dedicate a little bit of time, that would be really great. If you do not feel confident about reviewing pull requests, which include API changes, maybe just review the user interface part and say whether you like it. Maybe just review the CSS, like whatever you feel is where you can provide feedback. And we can have two small reviews coming with the same force as if one reviewer was taking all of that effort on. So please do review. And if you want to propose something for JupyterLab 4.2, I think that the date that we provisionally set that we would like to close submissions of new feature proposals is 27th of March. So there is still full 3 weeks to submit pull requests or finish pull requests which are in draft before we will freeze, and hopefully most of the pull requests would be merged by then, but if something has to be done at the last minute, that would be the deadline. And the final point from me is just to highlight that there is a proposal to transfer Project Jupyter to Linux Foundation from the non-focus foundation, but that's not something that we probably will discuss on this call because there will be a dedicated call for that, and just highlighting the proposal if you didn't see that. If you are on the Jupyter Council, you should have an email with a little bit more explanation as well, and link to the public discussion. I couldn't find that quickly to have a look. And final point is about maintenance item with links, check links, drop filing very frequently. As a very temporary solution, I opened a pull request on maintainer tools to disable checking links to GitHub user profiles and organization profiles. I would appreciate if someone else could take a look at it, because it seems to me that failures are unrelated and we could merge that. But that's actually something that new contributors have been asking about, like why is this job failing? And it's annoying because on all pull requests, we have red status, even though it's just because there are thousands of links to GitHub profiles in the changelog, and I think we shouldn't need to check them all. Yeah, it accepts ignore patterns, and that pull request is basically adding an ignore pattern. So answering Nick's comment, that's it from me. Thank you all.
All right, thanks, Mike. Any questions, comments on any of the issues above?
So we need a fix in the maintainer tools, and we are not able to use the ignore patterns in the lab repo at the moment.
Yeah, I think these are not exposed as an option. Or
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I never remember if it is, but I thought it was. Yeah. Maybe not. Maybe not.
Yeah, I will double check. But I think it would make sense to toggle it globally, because like Notebook would likely also run into this problem once it gathers longer changelog.
But I think the pull request you open makes sense, because we often see in the case of people changing their handle on GitHub and then leading to 404s, and a little bit of noise that we could avoid for sure.
Yeah, agreed. I think that GitHub shows you a warning when you change your username that things can go wrong. And if you really care about that, you can go and make a pull request updating that. But I don't think that maintainers should be looking after handles of thousands of contributors over the lifetime of the project and making sure that these are staying up to date.
All right, well, Jeremy, you are up next on the agenda. You have a couple items listed. If anyone else has anything they want to talk about, I'll paste in the agenda one more time. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah. It's mostly to share some progress. So we have an issue open on the lab repo about switching from Webpack to something else, and we've been keeping an eye on this new project called RSPack, which is it's like Webpack but written in Rust, and it's much faster. So I wanted to give it a quick try to see if extensions would build with it. And the good thing is that they also support module federation, which means that you can build an extension using this and still have it compatible with something else built with Webpack. So I tried building an extension using RSPack and load it in a JupyterLab, still on Webpack, and it seems to be working fine. But I'm not sure how many things would not work yet. But it looked promising at first, so I didn't dig deeper than just what we have in by default in the JupyterLab builder. But I was just bringing that up here in case someone was also interested in maybe doing a bit more investigations on maybe more complex setups for extensions, because we had that for 4.2. I'm not sure it would be possible to get it for 4.2, but in principle, it should not be a breaking change, or at least we should make it so that it's not a breaking change to extension developers, but more like an improvement for them in terms of developer experience and the speed for compiling the extensions. So for now, I just pushed some prototype in a separate repo, but this repo is really meant to disappear if we have that in core at some point. So it's just so that we have it easy for testing. So yeah, that's it on that point. Yeah, and yeah, that's what I have.
Nick has a hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
But I'm muted. Yeah, that's great. Webpack's trash, runs out of RAM all the time and opens too many files, and it would be great to get rid of it. However, Module Federation is cool, but there is that standard, the import maps and ES modules, that if we're going to make a breaking change and assume that going off of Webpack will be a breaking change. I've dealt with that internally. There's just stuff that doesn't exist out there for different bundlers and builders and all the steps and all the things that people want to do. I think the thing that we can do on a dot release is introduce the package that allows us to dissociate install JupyterLab from build extension for JupyterLab. So if we have the dedicated JupyterLab-builder on PyPy, then that can iterate at a wholly separate speed from JupyterLab, the application, and 1,000 build systems will cry out in joy at once that they're not installing the entire universe of Jupyter Server and ZMQ and all that stuff just to build an extension as a light wrapper around Node.js. So I don't think that JupyterLab should even have that opinion. It's the JupyterLab builder that's the separate infrastructure. It would own all the definitions of all those things. We'd use it internally. It could get shipped from the same repo. That's fine. We ship a couple packages from our repo, right? Like, it's not like another package is going to hurt anything. And provide something Webpack compatible. That's great. I assume it still uses Node.js? Like, you still Node.js install, you still Yarn install whatever builder? Builder us? I don't know. Builders are us, something like that.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
You still have to deal with all the binary compatibility issues, but you've got new binary compatibility issues.
What do you mean by binary compatibility issues?
Oh, like building anything on OS X, you need to get a big matching set of binaries or things don't run.
Yeah, sure.
And not the ones from Homebrew, because those don't work because it's a different glibc. Never mind. But to really take that pain away, it's gotta just work out of the box. And ideally, you would need standards-based stuff.
So a couple of points. I think it makes sense to have this JupyterLab builder package. And actually, I saw that someone created a new repo on the JupyterLab org, and I believe this is for the Google Summer of Code work. So I don't know what's happening there exactly, but there's been this new repo created, and I think it makes total sense to move all of the build stuff there for sure. But for now, they are in lab, and more specifically in the JupyterLab builder, which is why we were thinking of looking at that first. So I don't know. In terms of breaking changes, it should not be a breaking change for sure. I mean, it would be it would be a shame if we ask again exception authors to suffer from such changes for sure. And the reason why it was kind of appealing, it's because of the compatibility with the module federation, and that's why. So for now, we don't have we don't align on standards per se, but at least we align on the module federation thing, and it's maybe a good first step until we figure more things out. And then for sure, and that's what this repo showcases, is that you can have your own builder in a complete separate package. You can make your own builder if you want, as long as you compile something that is compatible with the module federation, since this is what JupyterLab uses. Yeah.
That's great. It is a de facto standard. Webpack is a de facto standard, and if you want to speak, then you're great. That's great.
But no, yeah.
But there
I
is
guess that would be the idea.
Yeah, there's a de jure standard that we could be using, and it is not. Nobody, Google and Microsoft and whatever have not gotten their grubby mitts on import map yet, so that you can only add import like they have with web components, so that you can only have web components that work exactly with their version of their particular thing. So the interesting piece would be, can Module Federation provide a transparent shim that speaks like an import map? So at build time, And at server launch time, we have access to all of those package JSONs. We have a schema for what we expect to find in those package JSONs that's injected by builder. We know we don't know the version of which builder built that thing. We know what their whatever it was, we know what their spec was when they built it, right? With the tildes and the carets and whatever, and you get those right. So we kind of know what schema they were using when they actually ran the builder, sort of, maybe. But I feel like if we got back to what you used to have with Notebook, where you could put a JavaScript file in a place and it ended up in the browser and it ran and it had access to the rest of the Jupyter API, that would move things forward in a user positive face that does not create this distinction between the elect that know how to use Node.js and people that have a web browser.
Yes. So actually, like, the reason I wanted to have a look at it quickly is I tried any widget. I don't know if you also tried it, and it's a pretty nice developer experience. So in a widget, it's like a wrapper around Jupyter widgets, and you get this kind of workflows where you can just define your widget in a module, just a regular JavaScript module, and then it even has the hot module reloading, and then you get that, and you get your changes propagated very quickly. I mean, it's pretty nice, and they still have a lab extension to enable this. So they still have an any widget JupyterLab extension as a federated extension. So I guess we could end up in something like this. I'm hoping. Yeah.
Is this going to have?
It also requires Node.js. So it's just different.
Not
it's not
necessarily. Yeah.
Yes, necessarily, if you want to use any other software and you want to package it.
Which part you said require Node.js?
By default, it goes out and uses CDN.js or Cloudflare unpackage or one of those things. So if you want to use any other software, you need the bundler step of it, and it's just another bundle.
Not if you only want to use a module hosted anywhere. Well, I'm not sure what are you talking about exactly? Like,
unless you do a bunch of stuff. If you do an import, it will go and import that from a CDN, and that is not a stance that we can rely upon as if you wanted to import widgets, you got to go import widgets from CDN. So the whole thing about module federation is you bring your boots, you bring everything. The default configuration of any widget is to go use assets from CDN. And that's a privacy nightmare.
Yeah, but I mean, widgets was just an example, I think, what I was trying to say. I was more talking about any widget developer experience. So,
yeah, it's good. I'm just saying, like, there are roads that they have given to give you that experience that are inimical to end user goals. That is all.
Okay, because you said something about just importing modules directly and then being able to iterate a little bit like with a classic notebook extension system.
Yes.
And I think that's what we would like to have at some point.
Yeah. Without Node.js loop or Rust.
Yeah, without. Yeah. And what I was trying to say was that any widget gives you something similar to this because they already pre-compile their lab extension, so you don't have to compile it yourself, and then you only have to edit files, and that's it. So we're just talking about the developer experience here. I don't know, like, probably there will be more things to think about, but at least when it comes to just editing files and having changes reflected in lab directly, that's something we could aim for.
Yeah, it's super rad, and modules let you do that. So again, the distinction between developer experience and user experience is the thing that I'm arguing against. If you must have JS, that keeps a lot of people out of the thing. If you must have CDN, then you can't ship a large class of software.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So one quick question, because I've been talking with folks about optimizing loading performance, like initial load performance of JupyterLab when we've got extensions installed, would RSPack have any impact on like the initial load experience for users, or is this just a build time improvement?
Just a build time.
I see no in the chat.
Just a build time.
If it's
It's
going to be
just
backwards compatible with Webpack, it can't change too much, right?
it's producing the same files as what Webpack would produce.
So there's almost no way. Well, there's a few places where we load a few extra things, but there's almost no way to get any faster than what the browser does. And we spent a lot of time worrying about this over on JupyterLite, for sure. The thing that, again, has been a huge source of problems or whatever on JupyterLite has been the service worker. And the service worker is the only thing that I know that would give you, on a second boot, something actually faster. It's actually faster than the browser cache. But first boot, I don't think that. I think that's out of scope. It's not. You're not looking at an HTML page. You're looking at a full IDE, and I really don't see a way that, without major re-architecting and breaking everything, that we could do better than that.
Well, there is a number of things that we can do. There are issues open for them. So one easy thing is to compress our assets properly, and I know that you did some work on that, and minify the assets. And we do kind of an okay job, but there are things that we are not doing. There are, let me see, deferring loading of iframes, early hints. There is a number of things that we can do, and I don't think we need like a lot of brainstorming. We did some profiling before for Pronex, and we had some regressions since. But in general, I think that there is enough knowledge in the community to know what are the action items. It's just that there wasn't much recent work since the 4.0 was released where there was a lot of work, but not necessarily followed by new profiling. Like 4.1 might have many regressions in that respect.
All right. Any other questions, comments about this topic? So I don't see anybody else on the agenda. Is there any other topics that people want to talk about on the record?
Who's in the room here? Nobody cares. I mean, Mike cares, but I just opened and Jeremy might care. I just opened a thing. It's a necro raising of getting language servers in the browser directly so that we don't need Node.js. Is there a theme here? Is something, is there a stuttering? Anyhow, so it would just take a while and it looked kind of big, but it was fun to write it because I could do nice class diagrams in JupyterLab. And anyhow, it's a pattern that we need in a number of places, which is kind of a hangover we have from Jupyter Server. The way that that's architected in Notebook originally is you just get one implementation of something. So there's one file contents manager. There's one, we added iDrive, and that's a whole other separate conversation. But a lot of stuff still expects, the file manager. And we didn't normalize the URI scheme or anything, so nothing knows what to do with those necessarily. But the ability to say, hey, I got language servers that are coming from the backend server, and Jupyter LSP is a hard dependency of JupyterLab. I still don't know why, because we still don't have any features that use that server, but it's loading it. And we also might have language servers that could be run entirely in the browser. So I'd really love to see myself get the time to do that, but I put out as full a design as that I could imagine for what might have to change to make that an extensible facade. Basically going from one plugin, one interface, and another interface to 3 plugins, 4 interfaces, and something else like that, just so that we can stand up a JSON language server. It doesn't need to read your entire file system or anything like that. You just got to tell it what your schema is, and it'll give you back feedback in the JSON setting editor, which we could use in a number of places. The longer con, and this is why I was looking through who's here, is other folks have been doing language server protocol stuff over kernel messaging, but I have not seen that implementation. But this would allow for that. So someone would be able to add a new language server connector or whatever. I don't, the specific terminology is not super relevant as long as it's clear. In addition to the web worker connector and the server WebSocket connector, you could add a kernel connector. And then it's up to you to figure out what language servers are available. When are they? Does it come into existence without you asking it, or do you have to start it? What is the way in which that, if there was an existing one in the browser, but you brought a better one from your kernel, how would you link that and tell the client that you wanted to use a different language server? So these are all, very different from what VS Code does with its language server. We need to embrace, extend, and make excellent the thing that they left us, because rewriting all that stuff is insane. So that is all.
What kind of language servers can run in a browser today? You said the JSON one?
Oh, yeah. So that's the other thing, and this is not going in the JupyterLab core repo. Microsoft doesn't package anything. They only package it over in their super walled garden. So if you want the code for the VS Code JSON language server, you need the entire tree of VS Code, which sucks. So you can get all of the ones that are hard-coded in there, which are JSON, which I believe also supports JSON 5, because they use JSON 5 all over with all their crazy dot notations and all those things. They support, which I guess we do too, whatever. I think we had to add that because it was too hard to write. People make really deep JSON structures because they can write them in that compacted dot format. Anyhow, it's gross. The HTML one, which is cool because it's got the full TypeScript types for HTML, kind of embedded in there. It's driven off of that. The baseline CSS one, and I think it also supports SCSS, SAS as well. Maybe less. Maybe it does all those things. I don't remember. And then yeah, so those are the 3 biggies that would come from VS Code. And then the YAML language server from Red Hat, which can also do JSON schema, but for YAML, of course. That one runs in the browser. There is Taplow is possible, which is a TOML one, and it knows a little bit about like PyProject TOML and Cargo TOML and a couple other like bottom of the stack kind of things. That's a WebAssembly jam, so that would be way the hell out of scope. Very much a developer-focused thing. Nobody just is like, oh, I wish I had some more TOML in my life. It's like a thing you deal with, not a thing you ask for. So all of those theoretically would work. Now, I ran into some issues with Webpack on the YAML language server, and I might just have to add some more polyfills or something like that, because whatever. But anytime that you use like the VS Code browser thing that's in GitHub or whatever, it's got a couple of those language servers, so it is possible to get those things running up in the browser. It's just they don't share how to do that. and it wouldn't work very well with, you know, module federation and all that. However, again, part of the language server architecture is they expect things to fail. Like Jupyter, we expect kernels to kind of fail or whatever, but like it doesn't take down the server if it does. So, you know, we can't put those things right in this main UI thread. Like if you're loading a 20 megabyte Rust binary recompiled to WASM, we can't block the main thread. So my initial thought on this would be use web workers, do it over post message, have schema at the edge points. That would give someone potentially the ability to add one. Like if you had a JupyterLab that had free reign to do all kinds of things, but then you had a language server that you didn't want people to do anything other than language server stuff with it, that was in another browser tab. I don't even know what that means, but theoretically possible. So if you had a little configuration thing, right? So it's like, I'm going to configure my scalable compute job, and you're going to write some YAML. The YAML does not conform to a schema per se, but if you could get to my language server in another tab, then I could give you nice tab completion of like, what region am I deploying in and what size of builder and all, you know, those things that are not hard coded as such. So post message would also do that. And then iframe, I guess, also does post message, but I don't think that's relevant in this particular scenario. And there's shared worker. Notebook could use shared worker maybe. So like if you're a notebook and you opened up 2 notebooks in 2 different hot browser tabs, and you're editing 2 notebooks, would you expect to be able to get completion from the unsaved notebook on the other side of it in the browser? So that would require a more complex architecture to do that. Or if you were like, I'm writing a markdown file, I'm writing 2 markdown files in 2 notebook browsers, and I want to tab complete the anchors in the other notebook, and I'm not hitting save all the time. I don't know how you do that, but shared worker is how shared worker is how you do that. So, yep, that's the thing there. I'll post a link to the URL.
All right, let me take one quick look at the agenda. I still don't see any additional topics. We have about a quarter of the hour left. Any other topics to discuss on the record? All right, hearing none. Oh, go ahead.
Quick discussion. So file tree. Has anybody worked on the file tree recently in the room?
I've been picking up a couple issues recently regarding the file browser, but I'm not sure if that's the same what you're talking about.
Yeah, the file browser. Can we just get custom columns in there? Can we have, I mean, I know it's a VDOM thing, or unless it's been rewritten in React or whatever, but man, if we could just put one icon in there with a command attached to it, that would make JupyterLab's life so much easier. So
Is there an issue about that?
no, I mean, there's one over on JupyterLab. Basically, we've got the most complex contents manager implementation I've seen in JupyterLite to support all the crazy deployment scenarios that we could imagine as we were building it. So the server during the build process recompiles the list of all the contents in the Jupyter content schema, if there was such a thing. It just uses Jupyter Server. If you want it, you got to use Jupyter Server because it's not standalone. And then it hosts up that entire tree per directory so that you can fetch it. It does not load those files. So if you put a 100 megabyte movie in your JupyterLite site, it's not going to load the 100 megabyte movie until you actually try and do interactive computing against it with like OpenCV, which works, which is insane. Or you actually load it, but then it's going to load it from files and just draw the thing for you. We allow you to edit things And then you get into this state where you don't know, like beyond the file is not saved, you now have the file is saved, but it's in the browser and it's at a new version that's newer than what's on the server. Or in the worst case scenario, the server has been redeployed, has new contents, and you have an edited version of the file that's older than the version on the server. Would you like to upgrade? So if we could slam an extra icon, yeah, and not rewrite the entire file tree, because obviously we could rewrite the entire file tree because it's its own application. If we had an extensible way to add Lumino VDOM elements, virtual elements, and they got titles, and they were sticky, and you could turn them on and off, that would be amazing. That would, you could write JupyterLab Git in that then, right? You would not, it would not be its own separate magic file editor. It would just be like, what columns do I want to see in my files right now? You know, what do I want to know about my Jupyter contents right now? So yeah, I mean, it has other things like Jupyter Git has like that compressed changed files view of just things that you have and all that. But I would love to see that, but no issue. Sorry.
Okay, well, I would appreciate if we could open an issue so we could keep this conversation going, because I was just looking through the issues queue pretty recently, and there are quite a few issues, some of which are 4 or so years old, requesting additional or more customizable behavior in the file browser. And I've only just started to look at it. I have no big changes to approve to show you just yet, but this is something that we should improve because I think a lot of people would benefit from it.
Yeah, definitely. The file browser is quite difficult to customize. We also noticed that in Notebook 7. So it's like at the moment, if you want to toggle some of the columns by default, actually you have to go through settings, which is a bit annoying. So yeah, I don't know if we can do something about it, but I hope we can. Otherwise, there is also this one under the contrib org. It's the unfold. It's the one that gives you this tree view. I don't know if it still works, but some people prefer that one. It does, yeah.
Yeah, it works, but it kind of removes all other columns. So
yeah, it's I don't know. Yeah. It's a trade-off.
And it's terribly slow when you have like a very large project, which is annoying me. And I will get to opening a pull request which fixes that, but it might not be easy. So we had issues and conversations on that. I'm trying to find this. I, for example, wanted to customize JupyterLab Git. Oh, there is still my draft pull request, so that it to like add more admonitions. I don't know. Yeah, and I think it got pretty far. But at the time there was an idea that tree finder. So this extension would replace the implementation of JupyterLab file browser, which did not happen. And I guess that Max is not interested in that anymore. So I don't know. We can try to reach out and see, but I don't see recent activity on that repository. Maybe minimal 7 months ago.
I hadn't seen this JupyterLab Git pull request. This is neat, but I'm sad it didn't progress past the draft stage. All right, we are 10 minutes till the hour. Any other topics to discuss on the record? All right, hearing none, I will stop the recording. Brace yourselves.